I never believed in fate until I met him. Lucian, cold, dangerous, unstoppable. Yet in the chaos of blood and shadows, I found something I never expected: desire, trust, and a bond I couldn't resist. We survived bullets, betrayal, and the darkness of the mafia world. Through obsession, danger, and slow-burning love, we found each other. This is our story. Two hearts tethered by fire, desire, and trust. Two broken souls who finally found home in each other. The night reeked of rain and gunpowder. Somewhere in the maze of neon-lit alleys, a man walked alone, not running, not hiding, but walking through the chaos as if the storm itself bowed to him. Elias Reed's boots cut through puddles dark as blood. The world had long stopped being kind to him. The last thing he'd buried wasn't a body, it was his hope. And yet he was still breathing. That in itself was defiance. The air around him was thick with danger, shouts, gunshots echoing far off. But Elias's eyes were calm, too calm for a man who just stepped into the lion's den. The name whispered across the streets tonight carried more fear than thunder itself. Lucian Vale, the ghost king of the Eastern Syndicate. A man whose name alone could silence wars. They said he didn't bleed, didn't laugh, didn't feel. They said he'd killed love the day he took the throne of crime. And yet, Elias came to him willingly. Because revenge didn't come free, and Lucian's empire was the only road to it. He reached the entrance of the Vale Tower, a cathedral of glass and steel that pierced the clouds. Two guards blocked his path, their suits black, their guns heavier than their stares. "Name," one demanded. "Elias Reed," he said, voice quiet but sharp enough to slice through the rain. "Tell your boss I'm here for the position." The guard scoffed. "You think you can just walk in and—" "I'm not asking," Elias cut in, meeting his gaze. "I'm offering something he won't refuse." Something shifted in his tone. Authority wrapped in ice. The guard hesitated. The rain whispered like a secret across Elias's jaw as he lowered his hood, revealing the faint scar that trailed from the corner of his lip to his chin, the kind of mark that told stories you didn't want to hear. Moments later, a voice came through the guard's earpiece, low and smooth, like smoke curling through velvet. "Send him up." Lucian Vale. The elevator was silent except for the soft hum of rain against glass. Elias's reflection stared back at him, hollow eyes, a faint bruise near his collarbone, and a steadiness that felt unnatural for a man about to meet a devil. When the doors slid open, a wave of darkness greeted him. Lucian Vale's office wasn't an office. It was a throne room dressed in modern skin. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, its chaos glowing beneath his feet. The man himself stood by the glass, back turned, a cigarette glowing between his fingers like the last ember of a dying star. "Elias Reed," Lucian said without looking back. His voice wasn't loud, yet it carried like gravity. "You've been a ghost for 2 years. No records, no family, no debts." He turned then, eyes pale gray, cold enough to freeze a storm mid-breath. "Why appear now?" Elias held his stare. "Because you're the only man alive who can help me destroy the one who took everything from me." Lucian studied him, the corner of his mouth curving in something that wasn't quite amusement. "And what makes you think I care about your tragedies?" "Because I'm not asking for sympathy," Elias said quietly. "I'm offering skill. I know your rivals' operations, routes, codes, supply chains. You'll find no one more precise than me." Lucian's gaze didn't soften. It was the kind of look that stripped a man bare, dissected him piece by piece, then decided if he was worth keeping alive. Finally, Lucian stepped closer, smoke curling between them. "You're either desperate," he said, voice low, "or suicidal." "Maybe both," Elias replied. A pause. Then Lucian's hand brushed the desk, extinguishing his cigarette. We'll see how long you last, Reed. He leaned in just slightly, voice a whisper that carried power. Welcome to my world. Elias didn't flinch, because deep down he knew he'd just sold his soul to the devil, who might be the only one capable of saving it. The first week under Lucien Vale was not survival, it was dissection. Elias woke each morning before dawn, surrounded by men who spoke in codes, who watched him like a ticking bomb. His role was undefined. Lucien hadn't placed him anywhere yet. He was simply there, a ghost among wolves, his worth being measured in silence. Lucien didn't speak to him again for days, but Elias could feel him, that presence heavy and watchful, like the air itself was listening. He saw the shadowed figure at the end of the hall sometimes, a glint of gray eyes reflecting light, studying him, as if trying to decode a language only he could read. The metallic scent of gun oil sharp in the air. He hit target after target, bullets slicing through the silence with precision that made others stare. By the time he lowered the gun, his heartbeat hadn't even changed rhythm. Impressive, came a voice behind him, calm, deep, with that same quiet authority that made people stop breathing. Lucien. He stood near the doorway, dressed in a black shirt with the sleeves rolled just enough to reveal veins and scars. Faint, but real. His gaze trailed from the gun in Elias's hand to the way his finger rested lightly on the trigger, as if he'd been born holding one. Former military? Lucien asked. Elias shook his head, field medic. Lucien's brows lifted, faint, curious. Medic? With aim like that? Elias finally turned to face him. When you watch enough people die, you learn where not to shoot. Something flickered behind Lucien's cold mask, a shadow of emotion, almost human. Then it vanished. He stepped closer, the faint scent of tobacco and cedar filling the space between them. You think killing makes you less helpless, Lucien said softly. It doesn't. Elias's jaw tightened. Neither does pretending not to feel. For a moment, the silence was sharp enough to bleed. Lucien's eyes darkened, not with anger, but intrigue. People rarely spoke to him like that. No one dared. But Elias didn't tremble, didn't lower his gaze. There was something about the way he stood, broken yet unbowed, that made Lucien want to see what would happen if he pushed harder. He didn't. Not yet. Instead, Lucien's voice softened. You'll be assigned to me directly from now on. Elias blinked, caught off guard. To you? Lucien nodded once. You'll handle internal briefings, accompany me when needed, and keep people alive when I decide they're worth keeping. It wasn't a request. It was a claim. Understood? Lucien asked. Elias hesitated, just a breath, before replying, understood. Lucien turned, heading back toward the glass doors. But before leaving, he spoke again, low and deliberate. And Reed, don't ever hide your scars here. They remind men that you've already survived what they fear. Then he was gone, just like that. No goodbye, no lingering look. Only the echo of his footsteps fading into the dark. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, hearing the rain brush against the windows like a heartbeat. Something about Lucien's words kept replaying. Not the command, not the power, but the quiet truth buried in them. Lucien Vale didn't believe in mercy. Yet he'd spoken to him like someone who understood pain. And that was dangerous. Because pain was something Elias knew too well. It was what had brought him here, what had kept him alive. But for the first time, something in him stirred that wasn't vengeance. Curiosity. Maybe even longing. The next day, Lucien summoned him again, this time to accompany him to a negotiation with another syndicate. Elias followed, silent as shadow, across dim-lit corridors and marble stairs that reeked of wealth and danger. The meeting was brutal. Lucien didn't shout, didn't threaten. He simply looked, and men folded. The kind of dominance that didn't need noise, because silence itself bowed. Elias stood a few steps behind him, eyes scanning the room. He noticed things, trembling fingers, loaded pockets, nervous glances. When one of the men discreetly reached beneath the table, Elias's hand moved first, the click of a gun, louder than thunder. Lucien didn't even flinch. Within seconds, chaos erupted. The attacker fell before the trigger could pull. Blood splattered across marble, warm and silent. Elias's pulse stayed steady. Lucien turned slightly, his gray eyes meeting Elias's. No words, just a long, lingering look, a dangerous kind of acknowledgement. Later, as they stepped into the car, Lucien finally spoke, voice softer than before. "You shouldn't have stepped in front of me." Elias's gaze flicked to him. "And let you die?" Lucien's lips curved slightly. "You think anyone can kill me?" "No," Elias said, "but they can try." Lucien leaned back in his seat, watching him quietly. "Reckless," he murmured, "and yet precise." It wasn't praise, not really. It was fascination. That night Lucien stood alone by his office window, glass of whiskey in hand. The city lights burned like fireflies beneath him. He hated distractions, and yet, that medic with haunted eyes wouldn't leave his mind. He saw the steadiness in Elias's aim, the fearlessness in his silence, the echo of pain that mirrored his own. Lucien Vale, the man who felt nothing, found himself wondering what it would be like to touch something real again. When the elevator chimed, Elias entered quietly, files in hand. Their eyes met for a moment too long, gray meeting brown, both heavy with unspoken things. Lucien looked away first. "Leave it on the desk," he said, voice rougher than he meant. Elias did, and turned to go. But before leaving, he said softly, "You were right, you know." Lucien glanced up. "About what?" Elias's lips curved faintly. "Pain doesn't make you less helpless. It just teaches you who's worth enduring it for." And with that, he was gone. The door clicking shut behind him, leaving Lucien staring at nothing, his chest burning like something old had just awakened. The city was never silent. Even when the night pressed down like a shroud, engines murmured somewhere below, sirens cried in the distance, and rain whispered across the windows of Vale Tower. Inside, Lucien's world ran on muted voices and the rhythm of violence. Elias was learning its language. Days turned into weeks, faces came and went, names were erased. He became part of the machinery, efficient, precise, invisible. Yet wherever Lucien stood, Elias somehow found himself there too, a half step behind, an unspoken shadow. Lucien never said much, but Elias began to notice the small things. The way Lucien's gaze lingered on a map longer than necessary. The way his fingers tightened around a glass whenever someone mentioned betrayal. The faint rasp of his breath when memory caught him off guard. And sometimes, when no one else was near, Lucien would look at him as though trying to remember something he'd lost long ago. One evening, the call came, a deal gone wrong on the outskirts of the docks. Lucien moved like the storm he was named for, swift, deliberate, already armed. Elias followed, a med kit strapped to his side, pulse steady, though the wind outside tasted of salt and gunpowder. The air was thick with tension when they arrived. Men crouched behind crates, shouting over the roar of the tide. Flashlights cut through the dark like blades. Lucien didn't hesitate. "Cover the left flank," he ordered. Elias obeyed without thought. Bullets screamed through metal. He hit the ground, breath sharp, watching Lucien move. No wasted motion. Every shot a sentence. For a man who claimed not to feel, he fought with the precision of someone protecting something sacred. A sudden noise, a man emerging behind Lucien. Gun raised. Elias didn't think. He ran. The world narrowed to the crack of a single shot and the thud of impact. The attacker fell. Lucien turned sharply, eyes wide for a fraction of a second before anger, no, fear, flashed there. When the gunfire ceased, Lucien grabbed Elias by the collar, voice low and shaking. "Do you ever listen?" Elias met his gaze, breath uneven. "If I hadn't, you could have been killed." "So could you," Elias shot back, too quick, too honest. "And I'm tired of watching people die." Lucien froze. The rain slid down his cheek like glass, his hand still gripping Elias's shirt. Then, slowly, the hold loosened. "You're reckless," he murmured. "Maybe," Elias whispered, "but you're alive." Something in Lucien's chest cracked open at that, silent and unseen. He turned away before Elias could notice. Later, inside the car, the city lights passed in a blur. Lucien sat rigid, staring ahead. Elias watched him through the reflection, jaw set, knuckles pale, that usual calm eroded by something raw. "You saved my life," Lucien said finally. Elias's tone was soft. "You would have done the same." Lucien almost smiled. "You think you know me that well?" "No," Elias said, gaze steady. "But I'm starting to." Lucien's eyes flicked to him, briefly, dangerously, and the air between them shifted, heavy with things neither dared name. In the days that followed, the tension changed texture. It wasn't hostility anymore. It was gravity. When Lucien passed him a file, their fingers brushed. Accidentally, deliberately, it didn't matter. When Elias bandaged a cut on Lucien's arm, the silence between them was almost tender. One night, Lucien caught Elias asleep at his desk, papers scattered, pen still in hand. For a man who'd buried empathy years ago, the sight struck too deep. He brushed a stray curl from Elias's forehead before he could stop himself. The warmth beneath his fingers was real, steady, terrifying. He withdrew his hand as if burned. "Don't do this," he whispered to the empty room, though he wasn't sure whom he was warning. Us. By the week's end, rumors had started, quiet ones, that the Ghost King had begun keeping a ghost of his own. Lucien ignored them. Yet when Elias entered a room, conversations faltered, and Lucien's gaze followed automatically. He told himself it was strategy, nothing more. But the lie tasted bitter. On the rooftop one night, Elias found him smoking. The city spread below like molten gold. "Can't sleep?" Elias asked. Lucien's answer was a curl of smoke. "I don't sleep. I wait." "For what?" Lucien's eyes found his, gray and endless. "For the moment everything I've built stops mattering." Elias stepped closer, the wind tangling his hair. And then, Lucien's voice softened, a confession wrapped in shadow. "Then maybe I'll finally feel human again." Elias didn't speak. He simply stood beside him, their shoulders almost touching, watching the city breathe. For the first time, Lucien didn't feel alone. Morning crept in through the blinds like a half-forgotten memory. Lucien had not moved from his chair all night. The cigarette in the ashtray had burned itself out hours ago. The city below hummed with life again, but his thoughts stayed fixed on the man who had walked into his empire, carrying nothing but calm defiance. Elias. He heard footsteps before the knock came. Lucien didn't lift his head. "Come in." Elias entered quietly, sunlight tracing the tired lines beneath his eyes. He placed a stack of reports on the desk, then lingered, as though searching for words that would not betray him. "You didn't sleep," he said finally. Lucien's mouth curved faintly. "Neither did you." Elias exhaled, half smile, half surrender. "You notice everything." Occupational hazard. A pause. "Sit." Elias obeyed, sinking into the chair opposite. The silence that followed wasn't the sharp, wary kind they'd shared in those first weeks. It was softer now, like air stretched thin between two people who had forgotten how to breathe apart. Lucien leaned back, studying him. "Do you ever regret coming here?" Elias looked at him, then away. "Every day I remember why I did. Every day I find another reason not to leave." Something flickered in Lucien's eyes, surprise, maybe, or the smallest fragment of warmth. He picked up the file again, only to set it down, untouched. "You're terrible at self-preservation." Elias's voice was steady. "You keep proving I don't need to be." The line hung there, quiet and lethal. Lucien turned toward the window, because facing Elias felt too much like standing on the edge of something vast. That afternoon, a storm rolled in without warning. Lightning stitched the sky. Thunder cracked against the glass. Lucien's men hurried through the halls, closing deals, locking down shipments. Elias moved through the chaos with calm precision, the ghost within the Ghost King's domain. When Lucien crossed the corridor, someone whispered his name and then stopped. Elias looked up, just in time to see Lucien's reflection in the window, shoulders tense, eyes lost somewhere no one could follow. Without thinking, Elias spoke. "It's just a storm." Lucien turned, one brow lifting. "You think I'm afraid of rain?" "No," Elias said, stepping closer. "I think you're tired of fighting it." The words struck deeper than either expected. The thunder filled the silence between them. Lucien's gaze dropped briefly to the faint scar at Elias's throat, then rose again, slow and deliberate. "Go home," he said, softer than the storm, "before you start believing I can be saved." Elias didn't move. "Maybe I already do." Lucien looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. The hall lights flickered as Elias passed. Their sleeves brushed, a whisper of contact that neither of them acknowledged, yet both carried with them long after. Later that night, Lucien found himself outside Elias's quarters. He told himself he had business, security updates, schedules, but the lie fell apart when Elias opened the door. "Boss?" Lucien shook his head. No command, no reason." Elias's expression softened. "You shouldn't be out here. Neither should you." "I live here," Elias murmured. Lucien almost smiled. "So do I." The thunder rolled again, closer now. Elias stepped aside without another word. Lucien entered, the air thick with the scent of rain and gunmetal. They stood facing each other, too near, too still. Lucien spoke first. "Do you know what silence means in my world?" Elias shook his head. "It's the only promise anyone can keep." He looked at him then, really looked, and something unspoken passed between them, heavier than touch. Elias's voice was barely a whisper. "Then keep it with me." Lucien reached out, his fingers brushing the edge of Elias's sleeve. Just that, no more. But the contact was enough to make the room tilt. The noise of the storm fading until there was nothing left except breath and heartbeat. Neither of them spoke again. They didn't have to. The silence had already answered. When dawn came, the storm was gone. The city gleamed as though it had never rained. From his office window, Lucien watched Elias cross the courtyard below, the early light turning his figure into a line of silver. For the first time in years, Lucien smiled. Barely, quietly, like a secret kept for himself. The city never slept, its veins pulsed with neon wet streets reflecting the chaos beneath. Lucien Vale moved through it as always, silent, untouchable, a shadow among shadows. Yet tonight, something in the air felt heavier, charged, not with danger, but with anticipation. Elias watched from the corner of the room, quiet as always. Since the docks incident, they had moved almost seamlessly through the underworld together, though nothing had been spoken beyond orders and necessary words. But Elias had noticed the subtle things, the way Lucien's shoulders tensed when he didn't follow a protocol perfectly, the way his eyes lingered on him, not with scrutiny, not with suspicion, but with something else he couldn't name. The Ghost King's silence had begun to speak. It was late when Lucien summoned him to the private archives, a room few were allowed to enter. The scent of old paper, leather, and something colder lingered like a secret. He gestured to a chair, and Elias obeyed, kneeling into the darkness as if it had become familiar. Lucien's hands moved over documents, files, photographs, remnants of wars long past, people who had burned and disappeared. Elias's gaze followed, cautious. "You know," Lucien said without looking at him, voice low, "people often think power is about control. It isn't. It's about survival. Pain teaches you who deserves your trust." Elias leaned forward, careful. "And what pain taught you?" Lucien paused, fingers brushing a photograph that looked like it had been torn from memory. His eyes, for the first time, softened, not fully, but enough to reveal cracks. Loss, betrayal, a family that forgot me, a world that did the same. I built walls. I burned bridges. I killed the ghosts before they could reach me. Elias's chest tightened. He could almost see the weight, heavy as a storm, pressing down on the man. And still, you let me in. Lucian's head turned slowly, gray eyes piercing. I don't, not yet, but you see too much already. Hours passed in silence. Elias's curiosity was tempered with caution. He asked nothing, yet observed everything. The scars along Lucian's wrist, faint lines around eyes that had never smiled. Cold precision of a man who had learned that vulnerability could kill. When Lucian finally spoke again, it was quieter, almost tender. Everyone I let close either dies or betrays me. Choose wisely how you stand next to me. Elias's heart thudded, though he maintained the calm mask. Then I'll just have to make sure I don't. Lucian didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked toward the window, fingers curling along the ledge. Rain had begun, streaking the glass like liquid silver. Outside, the city was alive in the storm, but inside, the room felt suspended, timeless. That night, Elias returned to his quarters, replaying every glance, every small gesture. Lucien had said nothing affectionate, nothing warm, yet his presence lingered on Elias's skin like the ghost of a touch. He didn't realize he had held his breath until the door clicked shut. The next day, Lucien appeared beside him in the training hall unexpectedly. No words, just presence. His eyes swept over Elias, then paused, fixing on a small scar on his neck. A slight tilt of the head, almost imperceptible. Yet the message was clear. He noticed. Elias met his gaze, calm, collected, though inside his pulse raced. For the first time, he felt the danger in proximity wasn't just from bullets or enemies. It was from being seen by this man, who was a storm in human form. Lucian moved on, leaving Elias with his own thoughts, his own rapidly beating heart. By evening, Elias found himself walking the perimeter of the headquarters, lost in reflection. A memory from the docks, the feel of Lucian's hand near him, the closeness when bullets had flown, replayed with uncanny clarity. He knew the man would never admit it, but every small moment together had begun to build something dangerous between them. He whispered into the night, quiet enough that no one could hear. I think I understand you more than you know, and I don't think that's safe. And somewhere in the dark, Lucian watched from his office window, silent, breathing, calculating, and thinking the same. The streets were quiet that night, but the calm was a lie. Every alley, every shadow held threats that lurked patiently, like predators waiting for the slightest misstep. Lucian moved with his usual grace, silent, precise, eyes scanning. Elias followed closely, medkit strapped to his side, heart steady but alert. They were on a reconnaissance mission, one that Lucian had decided to lead personally. For Elias, it was both an honor and a test. He knew better than to show hesitation. The Ghost King had no patience for mistakes. Split up, Lucian commanded, voice low, almost a whisper, but carrying absolute authority. One mistake, one glance in the wrong direction, and this ends badly. Elias nodded, understood. Gaze lingered a fraction too long before he moved, as if weighing him, measuring whether Elias would falter under pressure. That glance burned hotter than the gunmetal in his hands. Elias moved silently through the shadows, muscles coiled like a spring. Every step, every breath was a calculation. The air was thick with the scent of rain and asphalt, mingling with the faint tang of danger. And then it happened. A faint scuff, a breath too close, a gun barrel rising from a dark corner. Elias reacted instantly, A whisper of motion. The attacker crumpled before Lucien even appeared, but the seconds stretched, long and sharp. Lucien arrived beside him in one fluid motion, gun raised, eyes scanning. He didn't speak, didn't even glance at Elias. And yet Elias could feel it, the quiet acknowledgement, the unspoken approval. "You're learning," Lucien murmured later, voice barely audible over the rain. "Faster than I expected." Elias's lips twitched into a ghost of a smile. "Or maybe I just didn't want to die yet." Lucien's eyes, pale and stormy, studied him. For a heartbeat, the cold mask faltered, and Elias felt it, fragile, fleeting, human. He wanted to say something, anything, but the air between them was electric with unspoken danger, trust forming on a razor's edge. Back at headquarters, the aftermath was quieter, but no less intense. Lucien watched Elias from across the room as he cleaned his weapons. Noting the meticulous care, the steady hands, the calm despite adrenaline still pulsing. "You don't flinch," Lucien observed. "I have to," Elias said simply. "If I don't, someone else dies." Lucien's lips pressed into a thin line. That was the first time. Elias noticed a faint twitch at the corner of Lucien's mouth, a shadow of something close to pride, buried under years of control. That evening, in the office, Lucien called him over. "Sit," he said, and Elias obeyed without question. The room smelled of smoke and rain-soaked wood. Lucien slid a folder across the desk, but it wasn't the contents that mattered. It was the way Lucien's hand lingered near Elias's, brushing against his own by accident. Neither of them moved away. Neither spoke. The silence was a tether, tight and binding. "You're reliable," Lucien finally said, voice low, but fragile. "Don't make me regret trusting you." Elias swallowed. "I'll do my best. That's all anyone can ask." Lucien's gaze held his for a long moment. Then he turned, walking to the window, leaving Elias with the echo of that quiet, fragile trust, suspended in the air like smoke. Stop. Late that night, Elias found himself replaying every glance, every near touch, every unspoken acknowledgement. Lucien's presence lingered, more potent than any danger they faced on the streets. He understood now that trust in Lucien Vale's world was a weapon as sharp as a knife, and also, perhaps, a shield. For the first time, Elias realized that surviving Lucien wasn't about strength alone, it was about understanding him. And something in him wanted to, dangerous, forbidden, and irresistible. The city smelled of gasoline and fear that night. Lucien had received word that a rival syndicate had infiltrated one of their shipments, a trap laid with surgical precision. Every instinct screamed that this was no ordinary ambush. It was personal. Elias moved beside him, heart steady, eyes scanning. The adrenaline in the air was a silent symphony, the kind that only those who lived in shadows could hear. They reached the warehouse on the outskirts. The rain-slicked floors reflected neon red and blue from the police lights someone had carelessly left behind. Lucien didn't slow. He strode into the chaos like a storm incarnate. Elias followed, medkit on his side, gun in hand, nerves sharp as a blade. They moved through the warehouse silently, shadows among shadows. Then came the first shot. Metal clanged, and men appeared from every corner, eyes wide, weapons raised. Elias's breath narrowed. Every muscle coiled. Lucien was already in motion, fluid, precise, almost cruel in his efficiency. Elias ducked behind a crate, catching a glimpse of Lucien, gray eyes sweeping the room, every movement measured. One man lunged at Lucien from the side. Elias fired without thinking. The man dropped. Lucien's head turned briefly, eyes meeting Elias's for a fraction of a second. Not surprise, not annoyance. Something else, something unspoken, almost approval. The fight continued, bullets singing through the dark, bodies falling. Elias felt the thrill, the terror, the undeniable pull of proximity. Each time he risked himself, he caught Lucien's gaze, always sharp, always watchful. When the last assailant fell, silence descended. Rain from the broken windows dripped onto the floor, the metallic scent of blood heavy in the air. Lucien's chest rose slowly, but he was calm, unshaken. Elias exhaled, lowering his weapon. He was alive, so was Lucien. But something between them had shifted. Later, as they patched minor injuries in the dim glow of the headquarters, Lucien's hand brushed Elias's as he passed him a bandage. It was brief, almost accidental, but heavy with intent. Elias's pulse leapt, and yet he didn't move away. Lucien didn't comment, didn't need to. That single touch was enough, carrying unspoken words. I notice you, I trust you, but don't get too close. Elias caught his gaze and held it. There was no fear, no pleading, just quiet acknowledgement. Their connection was raw, electric, and terrifying. That night, Lucien found himself standing outside Elias's door. He had no real reason to be there, yet his feet had carried him as if drawn by gravity. Elias opened the door, surprised but silent. "Lucien," he said softly. "You fought well today," Lucien murmured, voice low, near the edge of intimacy. "You didn't falter." Elias's lips curved faintly. "Neither did you." The air between them thickened, unspoken emotion hanging in the space like a storm about to break. Lucien's hand hovered near Elias's arm, a fraction too close, a temptation neither of them acknowledged. "Go to bed," Lucien said, finally, voice rougher than intended. Elias's gaze lingered a moment longer. Then he turned, a whisper behind him. "I already feel awake." Lucien remained, staring after him. For the first time, he realized that the storm he was building around himself wasn't enough to keep this man out. By the next morning, a fragile understanding had formed. Lucien was no longer just the Ghost King. He was a man who could be seen, if only briefly. Elias was no longer just a shadow. He was someone Lucien had come to depend on. Their bond was unspoken, but undeniable. Every glance, every brush of hands, every shared danger had chipped away at the walls they had built around themselves, and neither could ignore it anymore. The headquarters was unusually silent that night. Even the hum of the city seemed muted, as if the world itself had paused, waiting. Lucien sat in his office, sleeves rolled, hands tracing the edges of documents without reading them. His mind, however, was elsewhere, tracing the lines of a man who had walked into his life like a quiet storm. Elias was there, quietly moving through the room, organizing files, checking the perimeter, performing the same routine he had done hundreds of times. But tonight, the routine felt different. Every glance, every subtle movement carried weight, unspoken acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. "You're unusually calm tonight," Lucien said, voice low, almost a growl. Elias looked up, meeting his gray eyes. "Because you're here. That usually keeps me steady." Lucien's jaw tightened, part irritation, part something else he wouldn't name. "Flattery won't save you," he said. "I'm not flattering," Elias replied softly. "I'm observing." The silence that followed was heavier than words. Lucien studied him, every detail, expression, posture, the faint tremor in his fingers he tried to hide. For the first time, Lucien considered stepping closer, bridging the space between them, letting the wall around his heart crack even further. Instead, he let the moment stretch, like a storm holding its breath. Later, an unexpected alarm shattered the quiet. A minor breach in the perimeter, a test perhaps, or a trap. Lucien and Elias moved in tandem, fluid, precise, instinctive. Bullets whizzed past, shadows danced, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them, side by side, breathing in sync, fighting the same enemy. Elias caught a hand reaching for him, a quick protective brush from Lucien that lingered too long. Not enough to touch fully, but enough to make his skin heat. After the chaos, standing together in the rain-soaked alley, the adrenaline still sharp, Lucien finally spoke, voice raw and low. "You're reckless," he murmured. Elias's lips curved faintly. "And you love it." Pear, wet dripping, Lucien's eyes darkened, stormy and unreadable. "Maybe, or maybe I'm beginning to care whether you live or die." Then, back at the headquarters, wet and dripping, Lucien finally allowed himself a small indulgence. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, staring at Elias in a way that was both possessive and tentative. Elias caught the look. He didn't move closer, didn't speak. He only let the moment stretch, quiet, between conversations. Intense, charged with everything neither dared say. Lucien's hand twitched as if drawn to him. He swallowed, then exhaled slowly. "Don't mistake this for sentiment," he said, though the words trembled under the weight of truth. Elias's eyes softened. "I don't." And for the first time, silence between them was no longer a shield. It was a promise that neither knew how to name, but both understood perfectly. By the time Elias returned to his quarters, the rain had stopped. The city gleamed like liquid gold under the streetlights. He paused, hand on the door, thinking of Lucien, of the danger, the quiet care, the unspoken bond that had formed between them in the shadows. He whispered into the night, barely audible. "Maybe surviving you isn't just about strength. Maybe it's about letting myself feel." And somewhere in the tower, Lucien felt the same truth pressing against him. Heavier than any weapon, sharper than any bullet. The ice around his heart had begun to crack. The night was a maze of light and shadow, a mirror of their own unspoken desires. Lucien moved through it with the calm of someone who owned every street, every alley, every secret. Yet tonight even he felt something unfamiliar, prick at the edges of his composure. Elias followed, silent as ever, heart steady but nerves taut. There was a rhythm to their movements now, a synchrony that had not existed weeks before. Danger had forced them together, and proximity had sharpened something that neither fully understood yet. They entered a club, a front for one of their informants, where whispers and smoke curled through the air like liquid. Lucien's presence silenced the room without a word. Elias noticed the subtle way people stepped aside, the way his hand brushed Lucien's ever so slightly as they passed, and he felt heat crawl up his spine. Inside, the informant was waiting, nervous, shuffling papers and glancing at Lucien with barely concealed fear. Elias could sense the tension between them, the unspoken rules of respect and threat that governed this world. Lucien didn't smile, didn't raise his voice. He only observed. Gray eyes, sharp as knives, and Elias felt himself lean into the quiet storm beside him. They worked together silently, exchanging glances, small nods, movements that spoke volumes without words. Then the informant made a careless comment, too curious, too familiar, and Lucien's reaction was immediate, precise, almost predatory. Elias caught the brief flare of control, of dominance, and it sent a shiver through him. Lucien's hand brushed against Elias's again, not accidental this time, deliberate in the smallest way, and the electricity between them was undeniable. After the meeting, they exited into the rainy streets. The silence between them was thick, almost suffocating. Elias finally broke it. "You scare people," he said quietly, voice barely above the rain. Lucien's lips curved faintly. "You're not one of them." Elias felt his pulse spike. "No, I'm not." Lucien's eyes darkened, stormy and unreadable. "Good," he murmured. "I don't let anyone close." "I'm not asking," Elias said, stepping closer, the space between them charged. "I'm here. You can decide what that means." For a long moment, Lucien said nothing. Then, without warning, he brushed a hand along Elias's arm, light but deliberate, a touch that burned long after it ended. The city around them faded into insignificance. Only the pull between them existed, slow, consuming, inevitable. Back at the tower, Lucien found himself lingering outside Elias's door again. It had become a ritual he neither admitted nor resisted. Elias opened it, quiet and calm, as if he had known Lucien would come. "You shouldn't," Elias said softly. "I know," Lucien murmured, eyes sweeping him up and down. "And yet, I'm here." Neither moved, neither spoke. The tension between them was tangible, a current neither could deny. Lucien's hand hovered near Elias's shoulder, almost touching, almost withdrawing, then lingered. Elias met his gaze steadily. "I'm not afraid." Lucien's chest tightened. He wanted to pull him close, to claim the warmth that had become essential. Yet he resisted. The restraint itself a thrill. "You shouldn't be," Lucien whispered. "And yet, you are everything I can't afford." That night, Elias lay awake, fingers brushing the sheets, as his mind replayed every glance, every touch, every stolen moment. He knew the danger wasn't just outside. They had become each other's storm, and storms, once unleashed, can stay healthy, will after battle, could consume everything. Lucien, somewhere above him, stared into the night, thinking the same, gray eyes tracing Elias's form in memory, aware that control was slipping in ways he had never expected. The shadows had begun to pull them closer, and neither could resist. The rain had soaked the streets again, a cold, relentless drizzle that mirrored the tension tightening around Lucien's chest. Reports had come in of an ambush in one of their warehouses, planned, meticulous, too close for comfort. Lucien moved like a predator through the wet city, his coat clinging to his shoulders, eyes scanning every shadow. Elias followed closely, heart steady, mind alert. They no longer needed words. Their movements had become a choreography of survival. Each step, glance, and breath, anticipating the other. They arrived at the warehouse, just as the first figures appeared, cloaked in darkness, weapons drawn. Lucien's hand brushed Elias's as he passed him, deliberate, grounding, sending a jolt of electricity up both of their arms. Elias caught the gesture, but said nothing, instinctively knowing it was a warning and a tether, both at once. The fight erupted instantly. Bullets tore through the air, crates splintered, shadows became lethal. Lucien moved with brutal precision, a storm of controlled violence, while Elias stayed close, covering his flanks, protecting him without hesitation. A man lunged from behind Lucien. Elias didn't think. He moved, pulling him aside, taking the bullet meant for the Ghost King. The warmth of blood and adrenaline flooded his senses, but his pulse raced not with fear, but with something far more dangerous, awareness of how close they had become. Lucien's hand clamped onto his arm, gray eyes wide and sharp, for just a heartbeat, before the Ghost King's mask returned. "You're reckless," he growled, voice low and sharp, but the words carried something unspoken. Concern, maybe even care. "I'm alive," Elias shot back, steady despite the ache in his arm. "So are you." Lucien's gaze lingered a fraction too long before he moved on, scanning the remaining threats. When the last assailant had fallen, the rain washing blood into the cracked concrete floor, they finally stopped. Lucien's hand brushed Elias's shoulder once more, this time softer, almost hesitant. Elias met his gaze, recognizing the weight in that touch. Not just protection, but a tether that neither had yet named. Inside the warehouse, Lucien pressed a cloth against Elias's wound with precise care, fingers brushing the tender skin, a touch that lingered longer than necessary. "You can't keep doing this," he murmured, voice tight, but the concern was unmistakable. Elias's lips curved faintly. "Maybe I want you to care." Lucien froze, his hand pausing mid-motion. Elias caught the hesitation, the almost imperceptible shift in the storm behind those gray eyes. He didn't move. The room hummed with unspoken admission, the kind that neither dared voice aloud. Back at the tower, Elias found himself cleaning his weapons in the dimly lit armory, replaying the fight in his mind. Every glance, every brush of skin, every heartbeat near Lucien's side felt magnified, intense. Lucien entered quietly, leaning against the doorway, observing him without words. Elias didn't look up, letting the silence stretch. He felt Lucien's presence wrap around him like a shadow, protective, watchful, consuming. "You're persistent," Lucien murmured, voice low. "In ways I don't like, and in ways I can't resist." Elias paused, heart quickening, then returned to his task, deliberately close enough for their proximity to matter. "Good," he whispered, almost to himself. "I won't stop." Lucien's eyes darkened, stormy, alive with emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. The air between them trembled with desire, danger, and the fragile promise of something neither could yet name. That night, Elias lay awake, fingers tracing the sheets, mind replaying every glance, every brush, every heartbeat near Lucien. He knew the danger wasn't just outside. They had become each other's world, storm and calm, predator and tether. And Lucien, somewhere above him, watched the city with gray eyes, thinking the same, aware that the ice around his heart was cracking faster than he could control. Drenched in neon and rain, a world of reflection and shadow, a mirror of the tension simmering between them, Lucien's movements were precise, silent, almost spectral as he led Elias through the maze of alleyways and abandoned buildings. Danger lingered in every corner, but for the first time Lucien didn't feel the need to shield himself completely. Elias stayed close, senses on edge, aware of every breath, every subtle movement of the man beside him. They moved as one, instinctively, silently, a bond formed in danger and nurtured by the electric awareness of each other's presence. They reached a warehouse on the outskirts, the scene of a rival gang's illicit operation. Inside, shadows flickered, whispers of movement betrayed hidden threats. Lucien didn't speak. He didn't need to. Elias already understood the rhythm of his steps, the sweep of his gaze, the tension in his shoulders. A shot rang out, metal clanging, and bodies surged toward them. Instinct took over. Elias dove to shield Lucien, taking a glancing wound across his side. Pain flared, sharp and immediate, but the sight of Lucien's eyes on him, gray, stormy, intense, sent adrenaline and something far more dangerous through his veins. Lucien's hand gripped his arm, not harshly, but possessively, pulling him to cover. For a heartbeat, they stood there side by side, chest rising and falling, hearts almost synchronized. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. After the fight, in the quiet aftermath, Lucien pressed a hand against Elias's side, just above the wound, brushing gently. "You're reckless," he said, voice low, almost growling, but the concern in it was unmistakable. Elias caught the hand, holding it briefly, letting the warmth sink into his skin. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'll always be here." Lucien's eyes softened, darkened, and for a fleeting moment, vulnerability peeked through the stoic storm. I know," he said, almost inaudible, almost forbidden. Back at the tower, Elias cleaned his weapons, every movement precise, aware of Lucien watching him from across the room. The air between them was heavy, charged with unspoken words, silent confessions, the kind that could ignite or destroy. Lucien finally stepped closer, just enough that their proximity mattered. Fingers brushed against Elias's as he passed him the cloth. A spark of tension, warmth, and desire rippled through them both. "You're dangerous," Lucien murmured, voice low, rough with emotion. "Not just because of what you do, but because of what you make me feel." Elias looked up, eyes steady, unwavering. "Then maybe we're both dangerous," he said softly. The storm outside mirrored the storm within them, violent, consuming, irresistible, and neither could step away. That night, Elias lay awake, mind replaying every brush of hands, every stolen glance, every heartbeat near Lucien's side. They were bound by more than survival now. They were bound by desire, trust, and the dangerous pull of something neither could name yet. Lucien, somewhere in the tower, stared into the city, gray eyes haunted and alive. He understood the same truth. The ice around his heart was melting. and he would not resist it. The shadows had claimed them both, and neither wanted to escape. The night was suffocating, heavy with rain and the scent of danger. Lucien stood on the balcony, coat damp, eyes scanning the city below, as if it were a chessboard and every shadow a threat. He didn't realize how long he'd been standing there until a quiet presence made itself known beside him. Elias leaned against the railing, close enough for warmth to brush against Lucien's arm. Neither spoke at first. The tension between them had thickened into something palpable, dangerous, and magnetic. "You think too much," Elias said softly, voice barely audible above the rain. Lucien's eyes flicked to him, stormy and unreadable. "And you don't think enough," he replied. The words were a challenge, but the tremor beneath them was undeniable. Hours earlier, in the chaos of an ambush orchestrated by a rival syndicate, Elias had risked himself again. Drawn bullets meant for Lucien moved with reckless precision. The memory lingered now, pressing against both of them with heat and danger. Lucien's hand found Elias's, fingers brushing deliberately, seeking reassurance, grounding, and something more he refused to name. Elias met his touch without hesitation, letting the warmth seep through, letting the tension stretch into the silence. "You don't have to hide from me," Elias murmured. "Not here. Not now." Lucien's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to pull back, to maintain control, yet he was drawn forward, tethered by a force he could no longer resist. His other hand lifted, brushing a strand of rain-drenched hair from Elias's face. The touch lingered, slow, deliberate, intimate. Why do you let me get this close?" Elias whispered, voice raw with emotion. "You don't trust easily. You barely trust anyone, and yet, here we are." Lucien's lips twitched, almost a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Because you're not just anyone," he admitted quietly, the words tasting foreign, dangerous, liberating. "And I can't stand the thought of losing you." The confession hung in the air, unsteady, heavy with emotion. Elias reached out, hand cupping Lucien's jaw, feeling the tension and vulnerability there. "Then stop pretending," he said softly. "Let me in. Let me see you, really see you." Lucien's eyes closed briefly at the touch, a shiver running through him. When they opened again, the storm inside them mirrored the storm outside. Their foreheads pressed together, breaths mingling, hearts racing in sync. The rain fell harder, drumming against the balcony, surrounding them in a private storm. Fingers traced along arms, brushing shoulders, lingering where touches could ignite, could heal, could consume. For the first time, neither held back, not entirely. Lucien's voice was a low growl, trembling with intensity. "I shouldn't, but I want you here, all of you." Elias whispered back, steady, unwavering. "Then I'm here, and I'm not leaving." The night wrapped around them, an endless, intimate echo of heartbeats, whispered confessions, and touches that spoke louder than words. Flames beneath the ice had been kindled, slow and consuming, and neither could deny it. When they finally parted, even briefly, the air between them was electric, unbroken, and full of promise. Neither spoke of the storm that had passed over them, but both knew everything had changed. Lucien returned to his solitude, gray eyes shadowed yet alive, aware that control was slipping in ways he had never expected. Elias, alone in his room, fingers tracing the memory of that touch, knew the same truth. Their bond was no longer just about survival. It was about desire, trust, and something far deeper than either dared name. And the ice around their hearts had begun to melt completely. The city was alive with danger and light, a world that never slept. Lucien strode through the streets with his usual precision, but tonight, his mind wasn't entirely on the shadows that lurked in every alley. It was on Elias, the calm in his storm, the tether he couldn't resist. Elias walked beside him, quiet, observant, yet aware of every subtle glance, every brush of movement that tethered them closer. They had faced fire together, blood together, fear together, and every shared danger had chipped away at the walls they had built around themselves. The alert came suddenly, a syndicate attack near the docks, aimed directly at them. Lucien's instincts flared, but so did Elias's. They moved like one entity, perfectly synchronized, hearts racing in sync, breaths mingling as the first wave of chaos descended. Elias's hand brushed Lucien's as he dove to protect him, unintentional but electric. Lucien's eyes caught his for just a moment, gray, stormy, charged with a force that neither danger nor restraint could contain. "You think you can keep up with me?" Lucien growled, voice low, raw with intensity. "I'm already ahead," Elias replied, calm, daring, unafraid. The fight was a blur of shadows, gunfire, and whispered breaths. They covered each other instinctively, every movement a dance of survival and trust. And yet, amidst the chaos, a new awareness burned between them. Their bond was no longer just forged in necessity. It was obsession, desire, and something dangerously intimate. Lucien caught Elias's arm mid-motion, holding him close, eyes searching his face. I can't let anyone hurt you," he admitted, voice trembling with something he never allowed himself to feel. "You won't have to," Elias whispered back, leaning closer than he had any right to, feeling the storm behind Lucien's eyes. "Because I'm not going anywhere." After the battle, drenched in rain and blood, they stood close, the city's chaos fading into insignificance. Their breaths mingled, ragged but steady, and neither moved away. Lucien's hand lifted, brushing the hair from Elias's face, fingers lingering at his jaw. Elias closed the distance, tilting his head slightly, letting the closeness speak for them. "I don't know how to do this," Lucien murmured, lips near his ear. "Not this, not you." Elias smiled softly, heart pounding. "Then don't. Just be here." The words, simple and vulnerable, anchored them. The storm around them became irrelevant. The world narrowed to just the two of them, tethered by desire, trust, and unspoken promises. That night, back in the tower, Lucien lingered at Elias's door longer than usual. His hands itched to reach out, to claim, to protect. When Elias opened the door, he didn't hesitate, didn't question, didn't run. "I can't keep holding back," Lucien admitted, voice low, trembling with intensity. "I need you." Elias's hand found his, fingers intertwining. "And you have me," he whispered, firm and unwavering, always. For the first time, Lucien allowed himself to lean in, pressing his forehead against Elias's. The storm inside them ignited fully, a slow burn finally unleashed. Their bond, obsession, desire, trust, and care had found its center. And for once, in the heart of chaos and shadows, they were home. The tower was silent, save for the hum of the city below. Rain had returned, tapping a rhythmic pulse against the windows, a quiet soundtrack to the storm inside Lucien's chest. He paced the room, gray eyes shadowed and alive, replaying the moments with Elias over and over. Elias sat near the desk, weapons cleaned, the faintest smile curving his lips as he watched Lucien struggle with a vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. That smile was a tether, drawing Lucien closer even when he fought it. "You're thinking too much again," Elias said softly, voice carrying warmth. Teasing but calm. Lucien stopped mid-step, turning sharply. "I'm not," he lied, voice low, rough with something unspoken. Elias stood, closing the space between them, every movement deliberate. His hand brushed against Lucien's arm, lingering just enough to ignite a spark. "Yes, you are," he whispered, tone both comforting and challenging. "And it's okay. You can let me in." Lucien's chest tightened, the mask of control cracking. He wanted to speak, to deny, to resist, but he couldn't. Instead, he let the silence stretch, letting Elias's words anchor him. The simple truth sinking into the depths of him. He wasn't alone. Minutes passed, filled with quiet breaths and glances that lingered longer than they should. Finally, Lucien reached out, hand brushing Elias's jaw, thumb tracing the line of his cheek. The touch was electric, deliberate and unguarded, a silent admission that fear, desire, and care had collided. Elias leaned into the touch, heart racing, eyes locked on Lucien's. "I'm here," he whispered. "Always." Lucien's lips twitched in the faintest acknowledgement, but the storm behind his gray eyes said more than words ever could. The tension between them stretched, taut and consuming, until it snapped in a heartbeat of shared awareness. Later, they found themselves in the dimly lit hallway, fingers brushing, breaths mingling, bodies so close the air around them seemed to hum. The world outside, the threats, the city, the chaos, faded into irrelevance. "You're dangerous," Lucien murmured, voice husky, trembling with emotion he had never let himself feel. "Not just to me, but to everything I've built. And yet, I can't stay away." Elias smiled softly, hands resting against Lucien's chest, feeling the rapid heartbeat beneath. "Then don't," he whispered. "Don't ever step away. I'm not going anywhere either." Their foreheads pressed together, breaths mingling, hearts sinking. The tension that had been building over weeks of danger and desire finally found release, not in words, but in presence, in touch, in the unspoken promise that they were bound together, irrevocably. Immense how, as they finally parted for sleep, each felt the same quiet truth. The ice around their hearts had completely melted, replaced by warmth, desire, and an unshakable bond. Danger could still threaten them, chaos could still swirl, but in each other's presence, they had found a refuge, fragile, electric, and entirely theirs. And somewhere deep in the dark, their hearts beat in tandem, an unspoken oath that neither time, nor fear, nor shadows could undo. As the world worked in its habitual way, but inside the tower, the world had narrowed to just two men. Lucien moved silently through the hallways, thoughts consumed by Elias. Every moment, every glance, every brush of skin in the past days had become an ache he could no longer ignore. Elias was in the armory, methodically checking their weapons. Even in routine, Lucien could feel the pull, the steady heartbeat, the calm beneath the surface, the silent strength that called to the storm within him. Without warning, Lucien closed the distance, hand resting against the wall beside Elias, fingers brushing along his shoulder. The proximity sent sparks through both of them. Elias didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, letting the tension hang, palpable and electric. "You're always here," Elias murmured, voice soft, teasing, yet honest. "I can't stop," Lucien admitted, tone low, dangerous, and raw. "Every time I try to step back, I can't. You're always here, and it terrifies me." Elias's eyes softened. "Then stop trying," he whispered. "Stop pretending you can walk away from this. From me." The words cut through Lucien like fire. For the first time, he let himself falter. Gray eyes, dark, lips brushing against Elias's ear, his presence a storm and a promise all at once. They moved together instinctively, bodies brushing, a magnetic pull neither could resist. Lucien's hands found Elias's waist, steadying him, claiming space that was no longer just physical, but emotional. Territory marked by desire, trust, and an obsession neither dared name. "You're mine," Lucien growled softly, almost a whisper, lips hovering near Elias's. "And don't deny it." "I'm yours," Elias replied, firm, unwavering, fingers threading through Lucien's hair. "I've always been yours." The confession was both surrender and claim, electric and consuming. Every breath, every heartbeat, every brush of skin was a tether drawing them closer, until neither knew where one ended and the other began. Hours passed unnoticed. As they remained close, exploring boundaries in silence, letting each touch, each glance, speak the words they couldn't yet say aloud. Obsession wasn't just in desire, it was in trust, in vulnerability, in the quiet knowledge that neither could survive the chaos of this world alone. Lucien pressed his forehead to Elias's, voice trembling. "You're dangerous. Not because of anyone else, because of me, because of what I feel." "And what you feel is real," Elias whispered, lips brushing his, soft but undeniable. "I feel it too. Every moment, every heartbeat, it's mine." And in the quiet darkness, amidst shadows and rain, their slow burn had become an inferno. Every touch, every glance, every shared breath cemented a bond neither chaos, nor danger, nor time could break. The city burned softly beneath the midnight sky, neon reflections dancing on wet streets, echoing the chaos that had shadowed their lives for months. But tonight, Lucien and Elias moved as one, tethered not by duty alone, but by desire, trust, and a bond neither could deny. An urgent alert had pulled them out once again, a rival syndicate attempting a final strike, but this time the storm was different. They weren't just surviving, they were together, each heartbeat synced, each instinct tuned to the other. The ambush came at the docks, shrouded in mist and danger. Bullets tore through the air, metal and wood splintering under pressure. Lucien moved like a shadow, lethal and precise. Elias a heartbeat behind, anticipating, covering, protecting. When a gunman aimed at Elias from the shadows, Lucien reacted instinctively, throwing himself forward, taking control of the situation, and pinning the threat with effortless precision. Elias, chest rising with adrenaline, felt the surge of possession in Lucien's gaze, gray eyes stormy, wild, and yet filled with a feral tenderness meant only for him. "You don't leave me," Lucien growled, voice low and dangerous. "Ever." "I won't," Elias whispered, leaning into him, letting the moment stretch, letting the storm around them fade. "Not now, not ever." The fight ended as quickly as it began, the syndicate retreating, the docks silent again, rain washing away the traces of violence. Lucien's hands found Elias's face, holding it gently, tenderly, yet with the fierce possession that had become their signature. "I should have never let anyone near you," Lucien admitted, voice trembling. "But I can't survive without you either." Elias smiled softly, forehead resting against his. "Then don't. We're together now. Always." And in that moment, all the tension, all the slow-burning desire, all the obsession, all the danger, they melted away into something simple, terrifyingly beautiful, and complete. Love, raw and unrestrained. Back at the tower, the night stretched around them like a protective cocoon. They didn't speak much. Words had become unnecessary. Every glance, every brush of skin, every shared breath carried a weight no one else could understand. Lucien finally allowed himself to rest against Elias, arms wrapped around him, holding him like both shield and sanctuary. "You're mine," he murmured, lips brushing Elias's temple. "And you're mine," Elias replied softly, fingers tracing the lines of Lucien's face. "Always." The storm outside finally subsided, leaving only the quiet hum of the city. Inside, two hearts beat together, unshakable, tethered, complete. Danger could always return. The world could threaten them endlessly. But for this moment, for this night, they had each other. And that was enough. The slow burn, the obsession, the emotional journey, all had led here. Shadows had become warmth, danger had become trust, and the world had narrowed to two men who would face it together, unafraid. The ice had melted, the fire had ignited, and in the eclipse of hearts, they had found home in each other.